Hey guys, it's the 26th of September today. The sun is just about poking through all this cloud, but we're going to get a heavy downpour soon, so I'm just going to have to hurry up on this. Now, I've been filming, taking a little bit of footage, probably started a month ago, on the hot bins and the composting and the way I manage the composting on the ground on the allotment, and I'm going to put some of that footage into this video because, as I say, about a month ago I was videoing this bin which I'd just literally started filling. That bin on the end there had just finished cooking and I was about to tip it into the centre. Well, since then that compost was tipped into the centre. It was then moved over to there so that the compost from this bin could then be put into the centre, and since then I've refilled this bin once and I've just started refilling that bin again. So the footage you see on this video was me refilling this bin, and I stopped filling this bin about 2 weeks ago, so that's now cooking. I'm just going to show you that now. It's mosquito Armageddon here at the moment, so I don't want my neck getting bitten any more than it already is. Yeah, that is still at the stage that you can't actually touch it. It's too hot. So, as I say, I finished filling this bin about 2 weeks ago. It had been filled up 5 times, so you fill these up, they sink, you fill them up and they sink. I generally do them 4 or 5 times, and once they're at that stage I don't put any more in. But this stuff on the top here, oh god, that is so hot. This stuff on the top is a load of sweet corn plants that somebody gave me, and I ran them through the wood chipper and they've got so hot. But yeah, I'm going to leave this in here now for another 2 weeks and then it will be tipped into the middle bin. Now, this bin on the end here, I started filling this 3 days ago. I don't know if I don't think there'll be much heat in it just as yet. No, there's no heat in it yet, guys. It normally takes about a week, depending what, it really does depend on what you put in it. So this is approximately half full and there's virtually no activity in this. What's on the bottom is a layer of straw, clean straw, and I put a full barrel full of apples onto that clean straw. Then it's just had all kinds of vegetable matter has gone on top of that. If I want to activate this to get it going, I could maybe put some of my pigeon manure on it. I could put some urine in it, sprinkle some urine in, and that would sort of activate the heap. But I'm quite happy because I know at some point this is going to get going. Another thing I could do is just make a hole in the centre of this and put some of that activated compost that's in the end bin into that hole and cover it up, and then that would start the composting process. I might actually do that if it doesn't kick off in the next day or two. Now, this middle bin, this is the compost that came from this bin I've just showed you on the left. That's the bag of straw that I've been using. I just use that when I've got a lot of green stuff. I just put this straw in with it. I got that off a compost heap. But this stuff here, so this is the compost that's been made in the bin on the left, and it's been in this bin about 10 days. It's still a little bit sticky and woody. I don't really worry too much about that because as this stuff is put on the beds, if those sticks aren't rotted, I will just simply rake them off the top. Once the compost's been down about 3 or 4 days, these big lumps will be on the surface. They'll get raked off and I'll probably run them back through the compost bin. But there's also a little bit of straw in this there, that straw, because I put some straw in because this was very wet, this compost, so I put a bit of straw in just to dry it out. I will actually leave this compost in this bin now, and probably until about November time, a couple of months away, October, yeah, about 2 months, I'll leave this in this bin. and I'll show you the compost now that was in this bin that came out of that bin, because I had to move the compost that was in here into a storage bin so that I could put this one in here. But I'm going to put the other stuff into this bin, and that stuff is 3 weeks older than this, and I'll just show you the difference that 3 weeks can make. There's no heat in this bin now. The composting, the heat side of the composting process is finished, so all that massive fungal and bacterial activity generating that heat is done. So it's just a matter of, you know, a bit of a slower compost now. And we'll go around here, and this is my 2 storage bins. The cover's on purely to keep the rain off. So and this compost is exactly, I think, 2 weeks older than that stuff, maybe 3 weeks older. You can see that is absolutely beautiful now. That's ready to put onto the ground, that stuff. Again, when I fill this bin from that middle bin, I put layers of that straw in just to dry the heap out a little bit. You can see just the difference a couple of weeks makes in that. It's lovely stuff. So what I am going to do, because I'm running out of space now to put my made compost, because this is older and ready to use, I'm going to put this on top of the stuff I've got in the middle bin, so that when I come to use it, this is the newest, this is the oldest stuff, and I'll be able to pull that off the top first, and then over probably the 2 weeks following that, the stuff that's below it should be more ready, shall we say. It should be sort of almost like this. The other thing is there's loads and loads of worms in this. There's thousands of them. So if I tip this into there, then worms will work right way through the pile then. So once this is added to that, that will be 1 cubic metre of compost I've made this year so far, which isn't a lot, but we have had a difficult year for growth. So the growth has been slow on just about everything for the first part of the year, and as a consequence there wasn't as much green material to put on the compost heap. Now this bin, this is my horse manure, which I got about 4 or 5 months ago, and it had already been decomposing on the pile for about 6 months. So then I put it into that bin over there first, and then I turned it into this one. This is now finished, and it is probably the gold standard of compost. Look at that. A few stones and things in it, but they'd be off the yard. But that is just absolutely amazing compost. Look at that. So that's horse manure and straw composted down. Beautiful texture to it, lovely and crumbly. And that's probably, in total, it's probably had around 12 months now to get to this stage. The worms have done most of this work because this heap never heated up. It originally had its heating phase when it was in storage on the farm. It went through that cycle and it went into the cold cooling cycle, and that's when the worms moved in, and they've just sort of done all this work in this on this. That's beautiful. So that is ready to use on the allotment over the winter. I'll also be using a portion of this in the buckets for my potatoes, because I'm growing quite a few more potatoes at home this year. I'm going to put about 20 buckets at home, simply because the last video I did, I explained that the potatoes were amazing at home because they didn't get blight. Basically, we got blight out here. I got a nice crop of spuds, but they were all very small, as the blight killed them off, killed the tops off. But the spuds at home got right through that, no blight whatsoever. As a result, they were huge potatoes. And also it's much easier at home to water the buckets because I can use a hose pipe at home. Can't use hose pipes on the allotment, you're down to just using a watering can. So you can imagine trying to water 20 buckets with a watering can every day. It's not the water, and once the wood chip, as I found, it gets kind of hygroscopic, so once the wood chip dries out in the buckets, the water just keeps running straight through and you can't sort of wet it, so the addition of this compost will really help that. So probably about a 30% mixture of this into that same wood chip that was in the buckets last year will just add a bit of water retention. That's what it'll add. So yeah, I wish I had more of that. Hopefully he's going to deliver me some more in the next week or so, and I can refill one of these bins, probably this one, probably the other one, sorry, because as I said, I'm taking the compost out of the bottom of there and putting it into the middle. So hopefully fill that again with horse manure and start this rotting down. Now I've been asked a few questions about the hot bins, well, since I started doing the videos on them, so from memory I'm just going to try and answer the ones that I can actually remember. A lot of people asking me about the construction on these bins, and when I first built the bins I put this polystyrene inside them. However, I found that the polystyrene does suck in moisture. Because the bins are getting hot and steamy, the steam permeates the polystyrene and it actually loads it with moisture. And then once it's wet, this stuff, it's not a very good insulator anymore. So I changed the insulation for the Kingspan type, which is the foam insulation with the silver foil on. That resists the moisture attack much better, and it's also slightly better insulation. So these bins here, each side have got 2 inches to 3 inches of Kingspan insulation inside them. And this, once this bin, both of these bins get emptied into this middle, that's the premise of having 3 bins. And once they've gone through that initial heat up stage, as I've said, they won't generate the same amount of heat again, so they don't really need this insulation. But this insulation is just a leftover from how I had the bins before. If I wanted to improve this bin dramatically, I could literally put 1 inch of Kingspan on the inside of this, and that would give me then up to 2 inches of insulation, and it would keep this polystyrene dry. Now they are, as I've said in previous videos, literally 4 pallets. So you knock the backs off the pallets, the skid plates, everything, but you need 4 pallets exactly the same size to form this square. Now the construction is the side pallets inside of the front pallet, so the back pallet is screwed onto the back of the side pallets, so they sit inside it like that. And the reason is, it's so that when I come to empty this bins, there's just 4 screws through there into the side pallet holding this front on, so you can see there where it just butts up to it. So I can then remove this whole front, it just comes off, and then I can empty the bin, because it's really difficult to empty these bins once the compost is made, because it is really compacted in the bottom of this bin. So you need to be able to get the front off so you can shovel it out and turn it or use it. The other question I get asked is, how do I fix the insulation on here? Well, these sides, as you can see, they're not, because these are 1 inch thick, they have just got one little clout nail or screw in the side at the top just to hold the top in. With 2 inch insulation, you're going to have obviously screws or nails that are longer than 2 inches. And what I have done in place is I've not really used many fixings on these. The only place I've used fixings is on the back and on the front with the 2 inch insulation, because if you cut the insulation for the sides and then you cut the back piece so it sits between them, you cut it fairly tight, and then when you push that in place it holds the sides in. The same with the front. So if you attach the insulation on the front to the front of the pallet with some screws, when you push the thing back, the insulation that's on the front, it holds the insulation on the sides in place. So all you really need is just a couple of screws in the top, straight through into the pallet, and that will actually hold the insulation in place, because once you start filling as well, the weight and pressure of the material just pushes against the sides and it keeps it all in place. So it's no great worry about fixing it. The other thing I get asked is, What about putting some air pipes in the compost bin to allow extra air in? That's a great idea, because it's like kind of like a Johnson Sue bioreactor, where you have pipes in the bin and the air moves through them, and it gets air into the heap. If there was a simple method of doing that, I would do it. But when I built my first bin, I did have a plastic pipe right through the centre of the bin. But to get air moving through that pipe, you've got to have an open bottom and an open top in the pipe, so that the air can actually move through. Because if you haven't got that, the air just stays static in the pipe, nothing happens, no air can enter it, no air can get out from it. So on that compost bin, I had the compost bin on a pallet, so a full pallet, and then I built the bin on top of that pallet, so there was an air gap underneath. I then put a hole in the floor and shoved a pipe in, so the air was coming up through the bottom of the pallet. And then I had a hole in the insulation on the roof, so I would put the insulation back on with the pipe sticking out the insulation, so the air could move through. Well, it worked. I mean, there was masses of heat coming through the top of the pipe. Once the heat started activating, there was steam and heat coming out of the pipe. But the trouble was, there was so much heat generated that the pipe started to bend, and it was sort of pushing, and the heat moves where it wants to move, and it actually ended up putting a massive big bend in the pipe. And every day I was taking the lid off and the pipe was moving, so it was a real struggle trying to juggle the pipe and move it back so I could get the damn lid back on. And I quickly, well, after the first time I filled the bin up, I never used that pipe again. But when I next filled the bin and I didn't use the pipe, there was absolutely virtually no difference, or zero difference, in the compost that the heat made, or the speed in which it made it. If anything, not having that hole in the top of the insulation kept more heat in the bin. So the pipe, although it was letting air into the compost, obviously just surrounding it, there was heat escaping from the core of the bin through the pipe. So to my mind, the heap's not getting as hot. These bins, they don't really rely, they're more of an anaerobic, is it anaerobic or aerobic? They're more anaerobic, the composting in these. You've simply got to rely on the fact that you need to put dead material, slightly sticky branchy material in layers in order to hold air into them layers, and then you alternate it with green stuff, dry stuff, green stuff, dry stuff. That's why I use this straw. So when I'm filling the bin, I'll put about 6 inches of this straw in, and then I'll dump green materials on top, because this straw will actually hold air, and it will hold enough air for that compost above it to then compost with the oxygen it needs. And these bins are they're just a faster process than a traditional heap. So you're looking really about 8 weeks in the bin, and then about 4 weeks to finish once that heating up period is finished. They're very, very efficient, these bins. So to answer, that's going a very long-winded way about saying you don't really need air pipes in the bin. I think it's detrimental to keeping heat in the bin, and it's that heat that breaks down this material and kills the weed seeds and any diseases that are in them. And the bins are sort of wrapped with plastic. They've just got the pallet there underneath, so they're just wrapped in plastic to keep the rain out. It's more important to keep the rain out than let air get in, because you don't want any moisture, any rainwater getting into this and making it really nasty and soggy, because they're already wet enough as it is. So you put some kind of lid on, whatever you want to use, just to keep the rain off. This plastic stuff also, when it's really windy here, which is most of the time, it stops the wind blowing through and cooling the insides down. It's just an extra layer of wind protection or cold protection. And they're just simply tensioned by them bungee cords, and all this stuff came from the builder's yard. It's what they wrap the timber in when it gets delivered, so it's a freebie. That's all it is, guys. And this is the bin. You can see the steam, maybe, I don't know, seeping up through the edges of this lid. There's a lot of steam in this bin, as I've said. So on the lid is loose, and it sits on the inside so that it can just go up and down with the heap. It's also handy having the lid going up and down because you're not having to constantly check if there's room to put more material in. You know as soon as you lift this lid open that the heap has sunk and you can get a little bit more in. And I do like the lid to be sat on the material because it keeps the heat in more, rather than just having a lid on the top with a big air space in between it. The insulation on the material stops the heat escaping through it. It traps it in more, is what I'm saying. And it's that generated heat that I want, along with all the microbial and fungal activity that's breaking down this material in the bin. So that's it from the hot bin, guys. Got to keep my mozzie guard up today. My neck, about 10 bites all the way down around the back of my neck where the mosquitoes have been able to get to me. I'll probably come back when I start laying this compost on the beds. Possibly won't need as much compost this year because I've got a lot of green manure growing in the ground, so every bed on the allotment is currently full of something growing. Thanks for watching. Please give it a thumb or a like or whatever you want, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.